Your next career move could be the one you never imagined. Web3 nomads. Everywhere jobs for anywhere people.
Okay, so we're back. Got a special guest today. We've got one of the co-founders from Factor DAO, Kurapika. Welcome, sir, to what I hope will be an interesting discussion. In fact, I'm sure it will be. It's great to have you here. I know that you are super busy. You guys have got your launch coming up on the 20th of February, so literally a week away. So we are recording this on Monday, the 13th, and it's really good to have you here. Give us a brief introduction in terms of who you are and what you're doing and how busy you are at the moment, because I know you are very busy.
Thank you, Jedi. Thank you, and thank you for having us. I mean, it's as you just said, it's been quite an exciting time, hectic but positive, and I'm really excited I get the chance to speak about it here today. So, first of all, as you mentioned, hi, I'm Kurapika, the co-founder of Factor. I'll give a quick background about myself. So, I've been doing what they call fintech for the last decade or so. I've been working with structured products and machine learning based sentiment analysis in order to create different rating products and valuation methods for anything from hedge funds, VCs, and government officials, which are like SEC-like authorities, to really go and be able to review and govern the companies that they're reviewing. In 2016, I personally fell in love in Ethereum. Like it totally blew my mind, I guess. I couldn't sleep. I didn't meet any friends. Which got yeah, no, it was hard. It was a good hard months where basically I understood that I understand something unique, but I still don't know what it is. And
Yeah.
I think I still have this feeling till this day. Like it's been 7 years now in crypto. I still don't know a single thing. It's too wild. Um, no, but it's ever evolving and super exciting. So in 2017, I basically took what was my professional background and applied it to crypto. So I created this rating firm for a research company that employed 20 researchers and analysts and created this transparent methodology of reviewing what was then the Wild West of ICOs. So we reviewed over 200 protocols. It was awesome. We found cool stuff. We found scams. Exciting times for 2 years. Then the market completely crashed. I think it was end of 2018. So we had to close the company, and I went back to advise to some protocols. I worked and contributed to some DAOs, and met my partner actually at the research DAO about 8 months ago, which we started off and immediately started working on Factor. So yeah, so me and my partner Shortcall, we were basically on it for the past 8 months, adjusting, building, developing, and as you just said, like finally now we have this traction, right? Like, lots of hype, lots of people talking about Factor, but it didn't happen. You could scroll down and see posts from June showing about this ugly MVP that we created. And yeah, no, it's a lot of change since. And right now we're super busy talking to basically all the different protocols in our ecosystem, which is Arbitrum, and external ones because we aim to expand in the future. And the community has been amazing as well. And yeah, we're very excited.
But before we get into the nitty gritty of what it is that you guys have obviously done and the plans that you have, tell us in idiot's terms, because I'm a little bit of an idiot here, and I would really like to know, what is Factor DAO about, and what are you guys planning on solving with your product?
Oh, I'm going to try something new because there's a new circling tagline internally. It's nothing official, but we call it the Tupperware of DeFi. Meaning we basically, and before we go into the layman's term, so the general framework here is building blocks or a liquidity middleware for DeFi. So Factor, you could look at it as a very simple no-code platform where you go in, And if you are an investor or you have capital that you want to utilize, you have all these different options, which we'll drop to in a second, different strategies, different yield pools, all managed by people who are strategists by profession, which we'll get to in a second. And, and they can choose based on their risk profile, whether they are more risk averse, they're looking for something more volatile, but with more risk reward, I guess. There's specific ratings. As I mentioned, we have backgrounds in research and ratings, so we are enhancing the platform with a rating layer to really allow the investor to really simply understand what they're looking at. It's like you can look at it as if it's like Yelp for investors. You can see what you're looking at, understand it quite simply, and decide whether you want to get exposure to it or not. Now, where these strategies are coming from, or vaults on Factor, they're coming from either individuals that are strategists, asset managers, hedge fund managers, etc. It could also be by protocols, and this is the reason why we partnered with many protocols, because lots of them are strategists by nature, and they are developing a protocol that will basically implement the strategy that they created. So Factor comes in and say, listen, we are now providing you with this no-code infrastructure. You go in, you create your strategy, and you are now be able to offer it to anyone directly. So it's like P2P finance, basically.
Okay, so in terms of so appreciate you kind of painting the picture in terms of what Factor DAO is and what it is that you guys are looking to do. Can you further describe to me how does it look in kind of like a real world case from inception to implementation and the process thereof?
For sure. So I'll first of all take you to the journey of a strategist, which is an individual, because it's a permissionless system. Around the end of March, we are going to enable anyone to go in and create the different instruments and vaults on Factor. So let's go through the process. You are now an individual. You go into Factor, which is again a no-code platform. You go into the creation wizard, and you're now enabled to create a vault. And you start by defining its name, its description, which is basically the methodology you are going to enable in the vault. And then you move to decide on the ticker or the token, basically, because the vault itself is being tokenized. And it's very important because you can then go and use it as collateral, LP it, stake it. There's a lot of utility that can be done based on the instrument itself. But you choose this token, let's call it XYZ, and you move to the next step where you choose the composite of the assets. Now, a composite of the assets, it's just the basic strategy. And this is what creates the indices, because you can decide, I now want to create the top DeFi Arbitrum protocols by native token. So you decide, I'm now going to take equal weighting, meaning let's say I'm taking the top 10 DeFi protocols and I divide them 10% each in terms of allocation. And I decide that the measurement should be by market cap. So the top DeFi protocols that are marked DeFi and they have the highest market cap on Arbitrum will be included in this passively managed vault. So you pick your composite, your asset composite, the basic strategies you're going to implement. You move on to the next step where you choose the permissions, whether it's going to be fully permissionless and be shown on our Discover page, or it's permissioned based on either whitelist or KYC, which is more catering to someone that needs different compliance methods, whether they're tokenizing real world assets or it's a hedge fund that wants to work in a more regulated territory. This is fully enabled via the wizard. You keep on to choose your fees, because when you create a vault, you generate fees if someone else is getting exposure to it, and obviously if the performance is well. So you choose your fees, it's fully customizable, and you shoot out your vault on chain. So this is the process. But if we want to look at, let's say, a real world execution on the partner side, for example, we've just recently partnered with a protocol called Plutus DAO, which define themselves as the governance token black hole of the L2, which basically means they allow governance tokens like the GLP, like the different governance tokens, the V1s that are enabled on the Arbitrum ecosystem, to allow them to be liquid. So basically, by partnering with Factor, Plutus DAO can now create a vault or several vaults that incorporate the different PLS assets or the liquid assets that they generated on their platform. And they now enable a basket of these to be able to get exposure to in a one-click process through Factor. So Factor basically enables more seamless access to DeFi protocols and solutions.
Interesting. So, I mean, obviously, the next and obvious question is that kind of the age-old problem and challenge, and that is liquidity. I mean, it's all fine and well that you have an idea for a vault and a strategy around that vault, but where do the challenges, or what are the challenges around liquidity, and how do you guys kind of almost create a free flow of liquidity to enter an ecosystem?
That's a wonderful question. And then definitely one of the biggest challenges when you look at something like a liquidity layer or a middleware. So how we solve this is, first of all, we've integrated with different DEXs and aggregators in order to allow the different routings within the vault. So whether you get an exposure to a vault or an instrument, or the instrument itself needs to be rebalanced, because a strategy could be passively managed. You could define different metrics that you want the vault to be rebalanced upon, like, as we said, market cap, volume, the world is your oyster. But you can also make it as an active strategy and rebalance it based on your needs, whether it's hedge positions, you want to adjust the longs. There's lots of different implementations that are required, and they, as you mentioned, require liquidity. So we don't only connect to those different providers of liquidity, we also do two different things to protect it. One would be to really go in and make sure that the supported tokens, like we want to support, and the infrastructure, obviously, technologically speaking, supports all ERC20 tokens. But we need to make sure that we begin with tokens or applications that are only capable of generating the enough liquidity to support Factor's feature. So right now we are looking at all the major ones on Arbitrum. Obviously, we're not looking into creating shitcoin vaults at the moment. This is not a need. This is not something that is required, and it also opens up a lot of gamification, like not the good kind. Someone to gamify the system and really start playing around with volume and detached liquidity. So we are looking at standard list of assets that are supported by liquidity, and we're partnering with many providers in order to make sure it will be more seamless. For the long run, we are working on a more efficient internal methodology of generating and distributing liquidity within our own ERC26 implementation.
I mean, is there a conversation that gets had where, and I'm sure you hope this happens, but getting DEXs to come in and set up their own strategies kind of like independent, obviously along the lines of what it is that you were saying. Is that something that is currently being discussed or potential partners looking at doing from a DEX perspective?
Yes. So first of all, 100%. Like we're already in discussions with. I can only share, for example, Camelot DEX, which we are currently launching on, as you mentioned, on the 20th of February. But we are also in discussions with several other DEXs and AMMs in order to support this. Not only support the liquidity, but to be honest, to incentivize the users via Factor, because incentivization programs are not just novel to the platform that they use. Let's say whatever protocol it is, which has a native token and a native protocol that generates some sort of a DeFi feature, they have the incentive to pump the volume basically and create more usability and more utility both for their token and their platform. And what we believe is, not only our belief, but we actually verify it by calls over calls over calls with different partners, which immediately saw the value and said, well, it's a win-win here. We're enabling them to create further utility and volume to their protocol and token. And Factor gains further TVL, which de facto means liquidity. And as I mentioned, Factor in the more long term is working to adjust its ERC 4626 in order to be more efficient within the ecosystem itself internally.
So in terms of the ERC that you guys are working with, I mean, what was the decision around that? Why did you guys decide to go with that? I mean, obviously getting into the more technical side of it, because a lot of our listeners enjoy that kind of aspect. But I mean, what was the rationale around kind of like from a technological aspect in terms of the implementation of Factor? What were the deciding factors around that?
First of all, I really appreciate you chose to say the deciding factors. No, but seriously though, ERC 4626 is something that came somewhat of like a blessing to us. When we started working and we figured out, okay, so what are we going to do for the implementation side, the architecture? And when we got hold of the ERC 4626, which is basically brand new, it's from last January, I think, about a year ago, it was fully implemented in the first time. And then the first mock-ups were created. I think Yearn took 6 months and then deployed it. And what it enables us, so just for anyone who doesn't know, so ERC 4626 is an implementation of a vault standard that allows any yield-bearing asset to be deposited in a vault and then being splitted as shares in order to allow a more liquid and efficient interaction with baskets, with vaults, etc. So the reason why we chose it, and it was very exciting for us, is not only that it saves a lot of time in terms of how baskets are being implemented, but it actually means that we can focus on the integration side and customizing it and expanding it in a much more composable way than to create this without, like with the normal, let's say ERC20 and 1155 wrappers or something.
Yeah, I mean, just for reference to our listeners, because it was something that came to my attention. You know, obviously when I was researching what Factor we're doing on the ERC 4626, and that is that, I mean, it's essentially a tokenized vault standard. That's you know, if you go to the ethereum.org website and you type it in, you know, from a technical perspective, it's kind of it is a product, a contract essentially that was built to facilitate, you know, tokenized vaults, and it's obviously perfect, like you said. I mean, it's a blessing in disguise, and obviously buying into, or more so, kind of like reinforcing this mind-blowing process that you went to when you discovered Ethereum, and then once again Ethereum delivers for you. So clearly there's a little bit of good fortune in that, and it's going to be really interesting to see. I think from a you know, because at the end of the day, like what I find fascinating about the space and what it is that we're doing and really like getting to the bottom of is that, you know, what works, what doesn't work, and it's ultimately an experiment, you know, and it's I mean, obviously the risks that come with that, but you know, more important in this equation is like the discovery that's going to come out of this. I have no doubt that there will be a tremendous amount of discovery that will come out of this. And I think the next question that's been kind of on the back of my mind when you were talking about kind of like the implementation and the process of, you know, putting this thing into practical action is like, what is your wish list? I mean, if you had like this wish list right now and you had liquidity and you had the means, you know, what would Kurapika set up a vault for right now? What would be your number one kind of like pick in the market right now?
So yeah, so first of all, I mean, to be honest, and this is even, I guess, a better story than the Ethereum one, because I mean, when we created the vault, and this is something we tell partners, by the way.
Yes.
We're
Yes.
like the core team here. We're not strategists. I know I've invested for years. I created indices. I'm not a strategist by profession, and we don't claim to be. We want to enable the infrastructure to create the most flexible strategies upon, and to allow investors to get the best risk management tools in order to understand what they're getting exposed to. So to your question, I wouldn't create a strategy myself. I would go in, review it based on the current, I guess, my capital needs or capabilities. I'd either go for a less, like a more risk-averse, yield-generating strategy, or again, if I'm all well and pleased and recession is not nowhere in sight, I would definitely go to somewhere more exposed to the technology itself rather than the yield. But it's very individual, and that's the whole point here. Like, we have no wish to really build this database of 5,000 volts, and hey, the world is your oyster. You can go and choose whatever you want. That's not helpful. That's even more complicated. What is helpful is the notion that anyone can create a strategy. The strategies are there. We want the 5,000 volts there, but we want to focus on the way to filter them in a correct way. To filter them not only by usability and UI, UX, but actually provide the risk management or the rating layer that will allow anyone to really understand what they're getting exposure to. Because even for DeFi native, it's starting to get complicated. We have like things you mentioned it, like innovation is blowing up. I mean, I went into crypto. I think we had one stable coin barely, and DeFi was still 2 years to come. Like it was not a thing. So we still need to evolve, experiment, and make sure that everything, all the fundamentals, are secured and flexible enough in order to grow in the future.
Yeah, great. That's very good context, and it is remarkable where we are. I mean, this discussion around having vaults for real world assets or even crypto assets, as a combination with kind of like the overlap that you guys are looking at doing. What I think that would have been like a pipe dream even like 2 years ago. I mean, and it's not even that long ago. I wonder with this whole thing, like in terms of, obviously there's always going to be a set of challenges, and obviously kind of like looking at the brutal honesty of the whole thing is like, what do you foresee? Like, especially, you guys are launching on the 20th. I personally believe, from my perspective, I think it's going to be hugely successful. I think you guys have chosen the right platform. The narrative is in line. I think there's just certain elements and variables that really are in your favor right now, and that's great. I mean, we can talk about the positives until the cows come home. What are the challenges that you guys see immediately post launch? And I'm not asking you this to jinx you. It's a genuine question around, like, what is kind of like your thought process, not only as an individual, but kind of like as a team, and how, what are those kind of like not necessarily fears, but just things that that you need to have a handle on, short term, medium term, and long term.
Perfect. Love it. Seriously, because first of all, I mean, you mentioned, I guess, how success. We not only can't really speculate, but we're really kind of flattered and overwhelmed. Again, we were working on this for so long, basically in the dark. We knew we had something. We saw the need. We spoke with all the required people, the community, the partners before that, but we didn't expect what happened now. So this is amazing, and it really just gives us more motivation to really deploy, and to be honest, the resources to really go and execute in the best way possible. So we're definitely excited to what's to come, and you're right. Like, it can't be a smooth road, right? Like, we're going into uncharted territories. I had a call with founder that created a protocol very much similar to Factor in a sense, like on the, let's say, on the surface level. We'll come to it in a second. But we were joking and say, like, so basically us two, like, or our teams are one of, I don't know, 50 people around the world that created, like, actually took this type of implementation. Let's say we'll call it liquidity, middleware, asset management, however you want to look at it, and really deployed it. So obviously there's some more that did it for lending and borrowing, but it's still such uncharted territories that it's scary. It's scary because you don't really know what's ahead. But scary is not necessarily negative. It's a feeling that brings in excitement. And when you have conviction, and we have conviction among the team, and it's amazing to actually see all the newcomers, whether they're from the team, the partners, or the community itself, joining into this conviction that there's something here. Like, we now have this infrastructure where we can grow it and put effort and make sure that, in your words, this experiment is not only successful, but it's doing it on the positive side of things. We're not, I mean, I know it might be a cliche, like, but you can go into my community calls. I mean, I talk a lot about something called social capitalism, or capital socialism, however you want to look at it. I think DeFi, asset management, however you want to call it, is one of our last resorts, or the last solutions that humanity has to offer to solve what is the post-capitalistic era that we're at. Like, it's the wealth gap, everything. We're going dystopia, and we're now in this position where it's not just Factor. All of us are experimenting in order to create what is not a new banking system. It's 180 from it.
So you are a bit of an idealist. I always suspected that about you. You know, it's kind of like. I mean, we've obviously spoken quite a bit before this. I've sat in on quite a few, of your community calls and a number of Twitter spaces, and it was obviously something that resonated, kind of like that connection. You know, you find connection with people, and I think I'm also very much an idealist on that. I mean, I think in essence, I'm probably more of a Bitcoin maxi than most people. And it's because of the reasons that you just stated right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, like, we interview a lot of people, and it's like, it's interesting because a lot of the time it is about the technology, and it is about, kind of like the frictionless process of allowing, traditional finance to operate on the blockchain, open ledger system, all these beautiful things that, we appreciate from a technological aspect, but we don't talk about the ideal aspect of it enough. And it's really cool that you brought it up, because it would be amazing to live in a world where we do have, this accountability and this ability to be open with one another on a financial level.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that has been, in many ways through the ages, I think a big challenge is kind of like the disclosure around, kind of money and how people make it. And I want to speak to that, especially on the gamification side of what it is that you guys are building, because that's obviously where, the exceptional traders and the exceptional investors and thinkers come in, and they do things. But ultimately, where do you think the common thread will lie with Factor that will allow anyone to participate, and for essentially anyone to do and progress really well in the ecosystem, just as Joe Blogs, as Mary Smith, or whoever you want, is like, how are you guys affording them that opportunity to do that?
Wonderful. Yeah, and before I touch this, I just want to circle back to what you mentioned about ideology and technology. I don't think they're not only not separate, but they are interconnected, because, I mean, if you look at, again, I told you my background is fintech, right, which is changing the banking system. We're disrupting. So this type of disruption is yes, it's technology based. It might be ideology based for efficiency, but not something social usually. even the social economies type of thing is mostly centralized. And this is the problem. And I think this is what DeFi solves. Because when we're looking at decentralization, this is what the technology enables. This is the major pillar. And so the technology is a must in order to really deploy this ideology we speak about. Because or else you're sticking with just creating a better, more efficient bank in a fintech, let's say. And you didn't solve anything about ideology, because no matter how ideologist you are, you're still a human. And humans are shit. No, I'm kidding. We're amazing. We're amazing.
We get
We're
caught up with
amazing,
the
but
shit.
we're
That's the
biased.
problem.
We're biased and we're irrational, and it's problematic to let people go, like a small group govern, whether it's a state or a company. And yeah, so this is what the technology enables. So that I think they go hand by hand. Now, what Factor is, and again, it does touch a bit about ideology, is, I mean, right now we have our pensions being managed by this hidden hand that we pay management fees to. We might go and play around in Robinhood and lose a lot of money because they play around with the order book and sell it to Citadel. Um, we're not in a position as the retail investor, as the individual. We don't need to look at it in financial terms to be in the same playing field with the financial players at the moment. And I think what Factor and similar solutions to it, this is what they do. They even out the playing field. They directly forward this financial capabilities that the people have. When you look and when you go to invest in whatever it is, BlackRock, or it's not that the CEO of BlackRock doesn't go and manage strategies. They have people that do that, and we need to connect them with the other people and make everyone happy. I know I'm simplifying it, but seriously, there's a lot to it behind it.
But this is why I wanted to simplify it. That's why I asked you the question that I asked you, is because I think when you're looking from the outside in, I think Factor's actually quite complicated when you look at it from a distance, but when you look at it up closely, it's actually really straightforward. It's
Ooh,
affording you the opportunity to be involved with a real tangible thing on the blockchain. That's essentially what it's doing. You creating the mechanism in order to do that. That's the one way of looking at it, because that's the only way that we will be able to get mass adoption, is to actually convince people that don't know about blockchain. How do I actually like enter this realm so that I can actually do stuff? I personally think one of your challenges are going to be like, what do you then do when you have like an influx of maybe too many people trying to do too much? You know, kind of like in the long term. Maybe it happens in the medium term. I don't know. But that could be potentially a problem, and it will be a great problem to have. Is how do you then kind of like almost regulate the influx of that capital coming in so that it's obviously manageable and the rest of it. Amazing problem to have. Obviously, I'm wishing you the best case scenario here, but that's a problem that could really
it is a
easily
problem.
arise. Yes.
It is a problem, and you know what? I want to circle back to another question you asked about problems, because I think it just flew from my mind. One of the problems we're facing majorly by the fact that we're not new, but we haven't launched yet. We have a lot in the backlog, a lot in the back end going on. We have been working for so long, been modeling, been adjusting based on community feedback, been developing, but the platform isn't launched yet. The beta is, by the way, going to be live in a week or so from now. So please go and join the beta testing. We really want feedback. But really, it's hard to externalize information. We, the entrepreneurs, the team itself, the community, even the original community members on Discord, they know that they've been around. They eat and drink and sleep Factor for months now. But it's really hard to externalize the information until you have the platform online, because there's documentations and there's modeling, and while it might all be clear in your head and even inside your community, the influx of new people, we're still talking about the DeFi realm, is you need to go and, I would say, educate, but just externalize all the information that you hold, have any ideas, and this is what we're doing. It's all about transparency, because it's not just about the ideology side of it. You want feedback in order to improve. This is what it's all about, and it's free feedback. So please come and join the beta. But for the adoption question, I mean, listen, normies. I mean, one of the analogies I use when I talk to them, it's like, listen, I mean, you don't know how the internet works, right? I barely know how the internet works. Yeah, there's some TPC, there's protocols, etc. You don't know, you need to understand the intricacies of the technology in order to use it. You need the platforms, the UX UI, just the interface to be as simple, as seamless as possible to allow mass adoption to come. And finance is no difference, by the way, even when you're externalizing DeFi. Like, finance is not complicated. It was created in a complicated language and within a complex system in order to alienate the layman. And by the fact that we can create this ecosystem of strategists, risk managers, and the capital, or the people that want to utilize their capital, once we do that, we incentivize them well and make sure that the strategists go and create the best methodologies that they have. We have the risk managers that are making sure to convey and coordinate any type of metrics of performance, yield generation, any type of platform metrics that need to be externalized, rated, in order to allow the third party here, which is the investors, to get the most seamless exposure without going into the nitty-gritties. Like, there is no actual need for you to know what a Serotino or a beta is, or a delta neutral strategy. You need to understand as an individual what is risk and how risk is being managed. And we're not talking about jumping steps here, right? You mentioned regulation. We believe in self-regulation. We believe that the regulator won't understand what's going on here, and let's say ignorant regulations are much worse than no regulation at all. So basically, we only look at the fact that the core pillar here would be for both the investor side and the strategy side to be synergized in a way that is self-regulated to the benefit of all parties.
Brilliant. So, I mean, in terms of the just coming back to, the essence of the product itself, or rather the protocol itself, there's obviously, I think, for like the short term, from like a beta perspective, are you guys primarily just going to look at yield pools to start off with? What is the kind of wish list in terms of what it is that you have on your roadmap? So from inception, from your vaults, what do you see kind of permeating or the result of that?
Yeah, for sure. So let's start with the beta. So first of all, we just want to give this notion of what Factor is. As we just discussed, we need people to first get a feel about the platform, give some feedback in order for it to start building the fundamentals of being an efficient financial system. So we start off by that, and in the beta, you'll be able to play around, submit vaults, like the different composites of vaults. You'll be able to get exposure. Again, it's on the beta, so it's testnet, but exposure to different vaults created to demonstrate the capabilities and how data is being demonstrated in the platform. And this just comes up in beta, as we said, next week. We're having the public sale, which will then be followed by the liquidity seeding and the V1 launch. So whatever is available on beta, we'll have time to bring in some more features, bring in some fixes based on the feedback, and deliver just after the launch. So we don't launch a token just for the sake of a token. We need it in order to be able to be utilized and used and govern the platform that we're launching immediately after. So just after the V1, we are already working with our current partners and the partners that we are officializing terms with. and working on the integration side to really enhance the platform, which is Factor, because the more integrations we have, the more capabilities and features strategists have to create, and the more investors have a variety or a diverse variety of instruments to get exposure to. And this will just roll out immediately after the MVP. So we finish the integration, we audit it, and we deploy it. And this will go on throughout March and throughout the life cycle Factor. And in around the end of March, we aim to fully release the permissionless side, which is the create, meaning anyone can create a strategist. We mentioned the beta, we already have almost 5,000 applicants. A lot of them want to create strategies, and it's a very great database of talent that could be utilized in order to create this magnificent yield strategies.
Great. And then there are rumblings of derivatives. I mean, we all love derivatives. So how does that look?
Yeah, listen, I mean, we came back to Factor as this liquidity middleware and this
Yes.
no-code one-stop shop platform. So when
Yes.
we talk about derivatives, there's so many protocols right now creating different options, futures, preps, CDSs, and the innovation is just keep going on. And of course, Factor could take a look at it and say, well, we could create it as well, but we can also go and enable all the integrations from within the different protocols that, as we mentioned previously, have this value that is created by integrating to Factor. And on the Factor side, both Factor as a protocol and for the users that are going into Factor, you've just enabled a much higher variety of diversification within the vaults. So you can now create hedged positions within vaults. You can take one option that is leveraged and combine it with a basket created by another person, which basically creates a limitless array of instruments that could be then created and customized on Factor.
There's a saying, build it and they will come. But I mean, as someone who really enjoys business development and obviously the strategies around that, are you guys actively, like, I mean, obviously now in the kind of like in the inception and on launch, obviously I would imagine there's a big drive, particularly around partners, to go out and get the business. But I mean, are there any like tangible discussions that are currently happening, in terms of the key participants, like asset managers, obviously the protocols we know, treasury managers from a DAO perspective? Do you guys have anything like in the works from that? Because I think that would be like a huge testimony, especially in the DeFi space, to, go and get a DAO to come and essentially create those vaults and obviously get the maximum value that they can from their strategy. And then obviously from an investor perspective, that's the reason why you guys are doing this public launch and the rest of it. But I just want to kind of like focus on particularly the asset manager side of things, in the traditional finance world.
Yeah. So first of all, I'll start by the partner side. I know like it goes to prong. So the partner side, I mean, I'll tell you personally, I'm almost surprised about how easy it is for us to go and do business development, because we show the value, and it's a win-win. And really, I never had it in any of my other businesses. It's clean. And you mentioned strategies. So what we come and say a lot of the times, there's lots of these different. It's very prominent right now that there's many protocols that launch one or two based strategy vault on their own protocol with their own token, create a whole tokenomics behind it, and hire a team of developers just to deploy a strategy that they have in mind. And by having Factor, you could utilize them, and instead of working on this entrepreneurial mechanism, which requires lots of time, this time could now be invested in strategy creation, in backtesting, and really be delivered directly on the platform of Factor. So we really allow those individuals or protocols to go and utilize and create those strategies directly without the need for developers to just create this, I don't know, yield aggregation protocol. So we already have above 20 partners that some of them are doing integration, some of them are creating vaults that are utilizing their assets. But you've mentioned a very interesting use case, which is not only cool, but is very interesting and to me personally, because I mean, we're looking at DAOs. We spoke about decentralization, the idealism behind it, and DAOs, they have treasuries, which is their lifeline. And we now need to have better solutions of how to manage these strategies of the treasuries, because they're much more risk averse. They are more, as you mentioned, the asset management side of things. It's not like pure investing. So you'd want to have these professionals, people that have managed big treasuries, to come and create on Factor in order for any DAO, whether it's a upcoming one or even a big one that is now looking to hire a treasury manager. It doesn't mean we nullify treasury managers in the sense of an in-house one, but it's a much easier access for him to really go and look for another protocol who has a DAO. And by the way, we do have some protocols already discussing with us regarding taking those treasuries and manage them as a vault, which basically means, well, I mean, if I'm a treasury manager from a protocol and I tokenized my treasury, and some other DAO decides that this is a good strategy and deploys their treasury on it, we as a DAO just made and basically monetized on our treasury strategy, which is something that is currently not really available as a solution in the market. So you monetize on your knowledge as a DAO on how to manage your treasury, although it's not your main core business.
Gotcha. The story is almost complete. I mean, obviously there's the kind of like one of the last things that I want to discuss, and we'll definitely get you back on, because I'm really looking forward to having a discussion with you, obviously post-launch, and, you know, kind of like into, you know, like the beta. There's going to be a lot that's going to come out of that. Once again, the experiment will be very interesting to see how it unfolds. So if you will, we will definitely invite you back, because I obviously want to revisit a lot of the conversation that we had today. But one of the last things that I wanted to chat to you about is obviously kind of like touching along around the idealism of this whole thing, in that, you know, there's obviously nothing wrong with making money, but at the end of the day, it takes a bit of money to make a little bit of money and to create potentially something that is sustainable, and that will kind of like extend beyond, you know, the next year or two. You know, like what I'm finding particularly over the last 6 months is that a lot of the projects that we've encountered actually are now looking at very long, much longer term views. When I say very long term views for crypto, it's very long. When projects are saying, you know, 5 to 10 years time, we want to have done the following, and I get the feeling that Factor definitely has the makings of that. I mean, obviously that will stand the test of time. But just back to my question. Sorry, I'm wandering a little bit here. But you guys opted to do a public sale, and, you know, obviously we'd love to give you guys some airtime around the public sale. It's, you know, you've given us some time. Can you speak to, first of all, why you guys elected to choose, you know, the Camelot guys, and why a public sale? So there's two questions there for you.
For sure. So first of all, I'll start with Camelot. Camelot, I mean, we spoke with them, I think, 2 months ago, and because it's not my token, I can speculate as much as I want. They're currently off the roof, basically. We didn't know that when we spoke with them. We were one of the first, I guess, or the first, I think, implementation of their launchpad after they actually decided to do so. And they were very forthcoming and pleasant when we started to discuss, and we discussed with other DEXs and launchpads as well, but they were really over the line with how much they wanted to help and their professionalism, to be honest. And I'm really glad to say that we now see the results of this, of like their professionalism. So first of all, I'm very happy for them. They're very nice people. But second of all, for us, I mean, they offered not only the support, but the launch mechanism, their fair launch model, which basically takes the BLP version, which is a successful idea, but it's prone to basically pumps and dumps. So I think they found this way to solve a very big problem in launches, in token launches, which is the valuation. How do you decide? Like, I mean, I did startup valuations for years, and whoever doesn't know like startup valuations, it's all bullshit. Like it's supply and demand based on potential, very much like we here evaluate tokens. We try to put fundamentals. It's near impossible to really understand what's going to happen in 3 years from now. Yeah, well, I lost the cord of thought. So yeah, okay. So Factor is basically I completely lost it, man. Yeah.
No. So
I
why a
went to
public sale?
idealism.
Why did you decide a public sale as opposed to?
Oh yeah. So we spoke about Camelot and why like their model is fitting, why we love them so much. But if we look at why public sale, I mean, Factor is like there's a reason why there's a DAO in the name. This is not something we have. There's already asset management or liquidity middleware solutions. We're not the first. We didn't invent the wheel, but we are pretty confident that we are, I think, the only ones to really deploy it in a fully decentralized way. Because if you're going, and again, some of them are great solutions. It's not about that. It's about the management of or the governance of a protocol. So a protocol can be great, but if it's centralized and the governance is half-baked or non-existent, we haven't solved anything. We just created a Robin Hood on chain.
Deck chairs on the Titanic, yes.
Sorry?
Or the deck chairs on the Titanic. I mean, that's what.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, that's the point. We need to put it in the hands. You can look at the tokenomics, and by the way, we got some good feedback, basically saying, well, we don't really know what your treasury, like what's going on in tokenomics. The treasury is 50% treasury reserve. There's 20% ecosystem incentive. What's going on? So that's the thing. People are used for people to look at the treasury locked and say, well, the team is controlling it, and well, that's dangerous for the long sustainability of the project. We've built a whole sub-DAO hyper-structure model to support both simple one-off token voting, but also quadratic voting, which is similar to Gitcoin in a sense.
Yeah.
So we basically have this hybrid governance system, which we, as I mentioned, it's hard to externalize everything because we do everything all at once. So this information, obviously, before the launch and the sale will go out. But the idea here and how DAOs should maybe be managed, but how Factor wants to implement it is using the governance mining model, is using the treasury reserve in order to incentivize DAO contributors and not the core team. We have no tendency to grow into a 200 employee monster. That's not the point here. The point here is to establish the community and to establish the capabilities and the talents and utilize them via the hyperstructure, which is the sub-DAOs. So to your question, the public sale is directed, first of all, to fill in the treasury, to enable them the runway to do so. We don't know if there's going to be a recession. We don't know if the market will flip at us again. DAO, like the DAO as Factor, requires the runway in order to enable the technology and the infrastructure it wants to implement over the next 2 or 3 years. And it requires capital to do so. So this is why public sale on one hand, public sale on the other is to really get to the distribution, the quick distribution of Factors in the hands of the community, the ones that are already active within Factors, social channels, within the Discord, taking decisions, making models. We have a whole associate program, which is basically the proto DAO kind of thing. And this is it, right? Like we want to have people managing efficiently with a variety of peer-reviewed opinions. I mean, this is what we aim for. If we'll just stick it with a team, I mean, yeah, we know things, right? We are experts in our own fields, but we don't know everything. And so DAOs that are executed well, and again, it's an experiment. It's very hard to foresee the future, but DAOs that will be managed well may and can execute much better than a traditional organization. This is our, I guess, faith here.
Great. I mean, it's simple. It takes money to make money. You guys need the runway. This is, in my opinion, this is the way to go with the current market conditions. You don't want to be running around trying to secure funds, from a raise, and it's actually a pain in the ass. And what you guys are doing,
it is, and I mean, it's important to say. I mean, first of all, I mean, I mentioned it. I'm coming from the startup world. Like what we now have, for example, with 400, 5,000 people on beta, like applying. This is worth a huge seed round if you go to venture capital. But venture capital defies the purpose of what Factor is. So we had to say no to some funds that came in and offered us participation because we referred them to the public, saying, listen, this is a fair launch. Everyone will participate. They will get the same amount or the same exposure, the same price point to avoid any type of governance, I guess, combats straight off the bat.
Yeah, I think it's really cool because it kind of like just falls into place around, the accountability aspect is obviously really important. It's kind of like what I like about a fair launch and a fair launch like this, and especially with like Camelot, who have, they've done some really good ones over the last couple of months, including their own, which, I mean, obviously they're the darling of the market at the moment. And it's obvious why, it's kind of like they really have, it's like, it's what's interesting about the space is like all it takes is like great timing and then exceptional execution and everything will fall into place for you. It's just, it just will happen, it's the way that's the nature of the space. And this is the reason why I'm feeling very positive about what it is that you guys are doing, is that I think you've had quite a lot of that happening to you, but then there's also been the execution thereof. It's been very interesting to kind of take notice. It's like I've seen a lot of hard work go into what it is that you guys are doing, and it's very obvious. Your Twitter account has grown tremendously, but it hasn't grown because you've done like a whole lot of like marketing stunts and kind of bullshitted everyone. It's been like, this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it, and you're getting on with it, and you say you're going to be somewhere and you're there and you're talking about what it is that you're doing. And that stuff is really very important because at the end of the day, it's about it kind of like this DAO structure. I mean, I don't think a DAO is perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but execution of what it is that you say you're going to do and how you're going to do it is, and you guys have done it. So
thank you.
I look forward to seeing how this public launch goes. So what we'll do is as well is obviously get a link to your beta for the stream when we put it out, and we'll also put in any other relevant links that would be kind of like relevant to what it is that you guys are doing. We'll chat about it afterwards. And if there are any questions around kind of like the finer details of the project, Blockmates did write a long form article on what it is that the guys are doing. So check that out. We'll put the link in the description of the stream. And I think that's about it from my side. Is there anything that you'd like to add before we wave you goodbye, sir, and obviously wish you all the best, and then we'll get you back on there.
Thank you, Jedi. No, so first of all, I just want to say just to your closing saying, basically, it might seem like Factor has hit overnight success, and we just need to handle it right now. I'll put the execution side discussion aside. Again, we've been working on this for 8 months. You could scroll down on Factor. There's tweets from June, from May. It's there. Like we were there. We had 40 followers. and we wrote about risk-averse strategies. It's not an overnight success, and what we now say internally that, hey, wow, this amount of traction from partners, from the community, from the socials, yes, it's exploding now, and it's very like it's not surprising, but it's flattering. Like I'd expect it to happen months from now, and I'm very happy that just to see that it didn't and it happened now. But we are now focusing on purely the execution side while being transparent. For us, it's the easiest to be transparent because then when you make mistakes, and you will make mistakes, they are communicated because everyone makes mistakes. So as long as you keep the discussion open, you show the roadmap, you explain every single model, and when someone asks you a question, you answer it and not diverge. This is how you get to success. So we're very focused on the execution part right now. We have lots to do for the beta, but yeah. So thank you so much for having us. Really excited. Love what you do with Blockmates, and yeah, excited.
Cool, man. It's been great to have you on, and I really like. I'm not just saying this. I'm looking forward to see how this really interesting experiment kind of like reveals itself over the next few months. And yeah, well done. I think, you've got a solid team. The work's definitely been put in. As I said, we've seen it happen before our very eyes, and it's just been great. It's just really is a testimony to what you put in, you'll get out. And I look forward to being proved right when you guys have a successful public launch. So good luck with that, sir. And it's been an absolute
Thank
pleasure.
you, mate. Thank you, mate. Have a wonderful day.
Go and subscribe to the newsletter. Come on.